Welcome to Career Coffee Chat Live. I'm your host, Erin Urban. I'm excited to talk to you today about how to navigate those sticky conversations that either need to be had or are having in the moment and unlooked for. So come on in, join us for Career Coffee Chat Live today. If you've never seen my smiling face before, my name is Erin Urban or Coachy Urban. You can find out more about me at coachyurban.com. And what I do is I partner with high achieving leaders and teams to elevate, impact, and influence without sacrificing well being. And most importantly, today we'll be talking about how to elevate your conversations without sacrificing your well being in the conversation as well. Walking away not feeling as if, gosh, I left something on the table, or that could have gone better. So come on in, say hi, don't be shy. Share with me where you're tuning in from. Please say your name just in case you're tuning in from one of the other live venues. We're live on LinkedIn, YouTube, and Facebook simultaneously. Woohoo, technology. So I'd love to see you, your smiling face. So once you see the notification pop up, come on in, say hi. And if you're watching the replay later, please reach out to me if you've got questions. Something struck a chord. Please comment or share your insights, whether that's via email, LinkedIn, or email through coachyurban.com. Or don't forget to subscribe. This podcast is live on a lot of major channels, including iTunes, Apple, Spotify, you name it, as well as YouTube. I, of course, have my own YouTube channel as well. So let's talk about our sticky conversations today. Hi, Deanna. Great to see you tuning in from Chicago. I hope you had a great weekend. I feel like this is Monday, even though it's Tuesday today, because we had a holiday weekend, some of us. So we'll be talking about sticky conversations. So as you tune in, think about a sticky conversation, either that you've had in the past or one that maybe you need to have. And if you feel comfortable sharing with me, share your questions. What are those things that kind of get you tripped up? And for most of us, I would have to say, we're not necessarily looking for conflict, right? So when you hear the word conflict management, it almost makes you want to run away. But really, what we're doing here in Sticky Conversation is making sure that we don't have conflict, or if there is some potential conflict or a tense situation, that we can navigate that situation as smoothly as possible. Hi, Jesse. Great to see you tuning in from Full Share. Yes, this weather is fantastic. Jesse says this weather's great for bicycling right now. Of course, we're experiencing lovely spring weather. My walking buddy this morning was like, enjoy this weather. It's the last cool day before the summer starts. I was like, oh, what is, I didn't really want to hear that. Yes, I know, reality check, Erin. That's actually what's going on. And I don't want to think about that hot, muggy weather just yet. I want to enjoy this wonderful, cool morning that we have. Hi, Tia. Great to see you. I'm glad to see you joining us. And of course, I want to highlight Deanna as well, tuning in from Chicago. So again, as you tune in, if you think about a sticky conversation, those of you who are watching right now, and consider, okay, is there a question I have around either negotiation or maybe a challenging conversation or a difficult discussion you need to have? Or perhaps there was something that happened in the more recent past. Interestingly enough, this this show was a little planned and unplanned. This morning I was giving some unsolicited coaching advice to one of my colleagues around some sticky conversations she's having with her family. So these things happen, whether they're in our personal life or in our work life, sometimes unlooked for. And what I'd like to say is there's really a couple different types of sticky conversations. And one of those is just a difficult discussion, right? Now that could be around, because it's a subject perhaps, and maybe it's a situation that's making it a little sticky. Maybe it's the person you're speaking to that might be making it a little bit challenging. So you're speaking with someone or trying to get buy-in or influence someone, or just try to work together with someone that you just really don't necessarily see eye to eye with. Perhaps it's a difficult or sticky conversation because of unforeseen conflict that arises. Right? You're going throughout your normal work day, supposedly you're trying to get something done, and conflict happens. Whether that's because there's different and diverse work styles, yes, not everybody thinks the same way. that sometimes breeds, hey, I work this way, you work that way, and the two don't necessarily mesh. That can create a sticky conversation. Also, negotiations. Some of us, yay, are negotiating our salaries or should be for new opportunities, or perhaps we're looking to move up within the organization. Well, that could be a sticky conversation too. So there's a couple different types of sticky conversations we might have, including interviews. Now, for our talk today, so it doesn't go on for hours and hours and hours and hours, we will focus on the first two. Those difficult discussions that may be happening because of subject, situation, or person involved, and potential negotiation strategies as well. Now, as you may already have figured out, because you're smart people, that the first thing to manage in any sticky conversation is, guess what? Yeah, yourself. I know, it comes as a huge shock. Yes, the first thing to manage in any sticky conversation is yourself. So let's talk about those unlooked for sticky conversations. Things were going along great, and then all of a sudden, bam, you got knocked off your center because, ooh, this person is not responding quite like I had anticipated or had hoped, or this conversation's not going in the direction that I would like it to go. Perhaps it's getting a little tense. Whatever the reason, you've now found yourself unlooked for in a sticky conversation. Okay, well, first of all, it's very, very easy to let our emotions lead the way. Now, for maybe you've been in a sticky conversation, what do you think about that? Should we lead? Should we lead with our emotions? What are your thoughts about that? Those of you who are tuning in. So, if we're finding ourselves in an unlooked for situation, and yeah, things aren't quite going the way we thought they were going to go, should we let our emotions lead the way first? What do you think? Let me know what you think, because I'd love to hear your thoughts about that. Because so I'm seeing a couple of people say from another channel, oh yeah, no, probably not. Probably not a great idea. I usually get myself in trouble. Absolutely. So one of the things we want to make sure is that we're managing ourselves first. So whenever we're going into a sticky conversation, it's unlooked for and it knocks us off our center, that probably means we are now a little unstable center-wise. We're not as calm, and it can be very easy for emotions to take over. Deanna says, unfortunately, it's hard not to let your emotions show. Yes, you're right. So how can we do that? Well, number one, very easy. Take a deep breath. You know that your emotions are starting to, you want to leap out there with those emotions. You probably have a point of view you want to share. You probably have an opinion. And gosh darn it, our opinion's always right, isn't it? So it's very easy to lead with that. And I encourage you to just practice the art of the pause and take a deep breath. That action is actually an intervention. So there's just a simple action, intentional action of taking a deep breath. And doesn't have to be a big like I do with my husband sometimes, jokingly when he said something, and I'm like, oh, not like that in the workplace, but just intentional, calm breath. Just that simple action helps interrupt the cycle. So your limbic brain, your emotional center of your brain, doesn't take over and go, I know what to do with this situation. I am going to force my opinion down your throat, whether you like it or not. Probably not the best way forward. So you might want to just practice the art of the pause. And it does take practice, because sometimes, particularly if the sticky situation or sticky conversation is super sticky and it hits a hot button, it is so easy to allow us to go, well, but, or be incensed, etc. So first, deep breath. Something, okay, right. So this is, and then that allows your frontal cortex to say, oh, let's think about this, to Jesse's point. Yes, he said, so try for emotional intelligence and think through, but tough if it's surprising and the intensity. So you're right on point there. So first, that breath, that interrupts the cycle a little bit. Okay. And even if you found yourself saying a few words into it, and you go, you know what, let me take a moment here and just pause. You can even articulate, gosh, this is really triggering for me. Do you mind if I take a moment to think about this? Because if you do get into an unlooked for sticky conversation, it can be triggering. And if you're triggered, acknowledge that and share that with the person. I find I'm a little triggered right now. Do you mind if I take a moment and just process this? Would you be okay with that? Most people will be okay with that because they're, guess what, human too, right? So we're all human. So maybe they're realizing, oh, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to trigger you. And go, no, 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 well, that's fine. And then you can have a more productive conversation around what's going on. Instead of not talking about the elephant in the room, actually talk about that a little bit and come to a more calm conclusion, whatever it is that's coming up. Now, if it's triggering for you because this person has a very different viewpoint than you, and you just find it appalling that they can think or say such a thing, which does happen from time to time. Different people have different viewpoints, political, their standpoints on various topics. And right now we have a lot of hot buttons to push. So if that hot button does get pushed for you again, okay, can you be openly curious? Can you practice the art of the pause? And can you be openly curious in the situation? Because oftentimes, if you're triggered, it's great to learn more before you start to share, right? So learn more before you start to share. Ask, oh, interesting. Can you tell me more about that? Or why do you feel this way? I find that very interesting. Or whatever. You might start to discover with this person and try to leave any sarcasm, bias, and judgment out of your voice. Now, this can be very difficult if it's something that you're intensely focused on. And it's a great idea to practice this because it will happen. And it may happen in the moment that really, really matters. And those moments that really matter, I don't have to argue all moments matter, but in a moment that could be particularly impactful for you, if you have more practice doing this, then you'll be able to show up 100% from your zone of genius versus just something off the cuff and a reaction. Okay. Now let's just say that, and let me know if you have any questions about that, or if something came up for you, you're not quite sure how to keep that poker face. I like to practice the art of the pleasantly neutral smile, right? I do that a lot. And I've got excellent smile muscles these days because you're doing this all the time on camera. But practicing the art of the pleasantly neutral smile. So right after you take that breath, maybe you're going from RBF to oh, okay, and you just put the smile on, and that helps circumvent this intensity of reaction, this looking to leap on this person and correct this wayward individual and share with them, doggone it, our good opinion because we know we're right. We're all right, right? Of course. So when we're having a dialogue, so let's shift a little bit out of the unlooked for shocking moment where we might respond a little adversely, and keeping in mind that if we can practice the art of the pause, taking a deep breath, maybe put that pleasantly neutral smile on your face, Deanna, that might help you cover up some of those emotions. You may not cover up the eyebrows. My eyebrows tend to go up. They're very expressive. And then ask, be openly curious. Renee's like, my face is often too transparent. Yes, I know. I came by it very honestly with my mom, bless her. She has RBF really bad. And for those of you who don't know what RBF is, it's resting face. So, right, this is RBF. And my mother, if you're sharing an opinion that she either doesn't agree with or is something new or really anything, she tends to look at you kind of like, what rock did you crawl out from underneath of? I'll go, Mom, you are scaring that person to death. And she goes, what? What do you mean? Like, you're like looking at them like they're a bug. Like, be a little, put on a little bit more of a pleasant expression. So this is not something that necessarily came natural. I had to learn how to be more of a smiley person. And what's really interesting? Being a little bit more smiley is also helped my mood too. So I can enter conversations a little bit more balanced, respond a little bit better, and use more humor in my life because we can all use that. So yes, our faces can give us away from time to time. And what we do next is always our choice, right? So again, taking that deep breath, pleasantly neutral smile, can we be openly curious and learn more about what is behind this surprising situation we're finding ourselves in so we don't get knocked off our center and perhaps respond in a way that doesn't serve us later on. So let's talk a little bit about these dialogues that sometimes need to happen in a moment. Because sometimes we do need to take it beyond being openly curious, right? We need to actually have a conversation. And how can we have an open dialogue, perhaps an art that is slowly dying, versus just letting assumptions happen or walking away? Now, probably this is obvious for most of you listening, but whenever you are entering in a sticky conversation and you know this is going to happen, whether it's planned or you are preparing yourself to enter in the moment, it's not a good idea to have this via text or email. No, not even instant messenger. None of those is good. At the very minimum, at least try to have it over Zoom or something of the nature. FaceTime doesn't really matter. I think most of our smartphones, smart devices these days allow some sort of feature of that variety. You want to be able to see the other person's face. This is very important. So barring one-on-one in person, at least try to get the other person's face in front of you. Please don't have these sticky conversations otherwise, because it's not that I'm technology averse. That's not at all the case. And let's be also open and honest that as a human being, we have not necessarily evolved to the point where it can act in absence of seeing that other person's face. It's just how we're wired as humans. Perhaps 100 years from now, who knows? Right now, this is the environment that we're in, and this is how we've evolved. So let's honor that and understanding that in order for us to navigate sticky conversations, we really need to see the other person's face if we can't meet with them one-on-one. So now we're getting ready to enter into this dialogue, right? We either just went from an unlooked for shock and surprise, oh my gosh, this is a sticky conversation, or it was planned. Now, open dialogues tend to be a bit of an art, but they're just that. They're open dialogues. And what we don't want them to be is this drawn out, pounding conversation. So rule number one is being brief. Now, I have to remind myself of that because I like to reiterate my point of view until the other person gives me explicit agreement. It's a little fault that I have. So if you find yourself as a person who tends to be a little bit more forthright with one's opinion, be aware of that and just know that we don't have to pound other people with our opinions. Perhaps we ask what theirs is first, right? So we want to be brief, we want to be to the point, and we also want to be open. So being open in dialogue is being curious and actively listening. So that's rule 2 and 3 right there, being open and curious and actively listening. Ask the other person more than you talk. So ask more questions more than you actually present ideas, and let the other person talk. Now, please don't be confused with thinking that, oh, well, I'm just going to let them have their way. No, that's not the point. The point is knowing who you are. So if you're a very opinionated and forthright person, this is probably the approach you want to take. If you are a person who tends to listen more than you talk anyway, and you also tend to let other people, oh, well, I don't want to be confrontational, I'll just let this person drive. That also could be deserving you. So picking your moments when you understand what's important to the individual getting confirmation of that importance, and then understanding how you can assert yourself or insert yourself into what needs to happen in a productive and positive way. So that's really the point of this. Having this open dialogue allows us to understand what is really important here with this person. Now, if it's, hey, I'm mad at you, we need to have a dialogue about that, ask them, okay, what's going on? Share with me. They share. I'm mad about this. Okay. Is there more? Well, yes, in fact, Okay. Do you feel like I've heard you? Yes. Okay. You don't have to agree. Just because someone's ticked off at you doesn't mean you have to go, gosh, I'm sorry that happened, my bad. No, you don't have to say that. You don't have to agree. You can just say, do you feel like I've heard and understood? Yes. Okay, and then you can start what we'll be talking about in a few moments, negotiation. Negotiation towards a mutual beneficial path forward. So actively listening is usually a great idea for most of us. Asking why, getting openly curious and understanding the message or the subject that's being discussed or what the issue is, what's the root cause, what's really going on. Take, for example, this morning, my colleague that looked for coaching, she was having some personal issues in her personal life. I said, out of everything you shared with you, what's most important to you? And that really helped her focus on what was really the sticking point for her and helped her understand that. So a lot of times it's more of a vent situation. So if someone's venting, then out of what you shared with me, what's most important for you? That helps people really get to a point. And then asking for their insights. How do you see this might be a good path forward? Right? And for those of us who tend to take more of a back seat and aren't as forthright, then perhaps making sure that whatever that path forward is, it also is a collaborative path and not just something that the other person wants. So let me know if that's you. If you're more conflict averse and you tend to let other people just drive the bus and don't necessarily stick up for what you believe is right. Because there's a few nuances there as well. It's always a great idea when you are in a sticky conversation to paraphrase. Don't be a parrot, but paraphrase. Something like, okay, great. Thank you, Vicky, for sharing that with me. Based on what I understand, this and such is important to you and you're looking for X. Is that correct? And that person can confirm or deny. Also a great idea when you're knocked off your center. So those unlooked for sticky conversations just come out of the blue and all of a sudden they're like, well, this and that and this other thing. And you're like, whoa, what happened to this person? They got off on the wrong side of the bed or what? And you go, wow, this is interesting. Based on what you're sharing with me right now, this is what I'm getting from this conversation. Is that your intent? Oh no, I'm sorry, I stepped on the dog or the cat puked on my bed or whatever, right? So they may be just coming off in a way that is unpleasant. That happens, right? Happens a lot in personal relationships. Hey, honey, do you realize that you're sounding a little confrontational right now? Oh, no, that's not what I meant to sound like. Okay. Just want to point that out, right? So checking in with the person, either paraphrasing or just checking in. Hey, do you mean to come off this way? Is that your intent? Is there something wrong? Oftentimes we don't do that. We don't check in, we don't paraphrase, we don't reflect, we don't pause. We just go right into reaction mode, which isn't always the best path forward. So rule number 7 and the last one for dialogues. So if you're having an unlooked for one or one that's planned is determine action items. And those are mutually beneficial action items, by the way. And that also means, which will segue in negotiation, that both parties may not get it just your way or just the other person's way. There's usually some sort of collaborative approach forward, right? So hopefully that makes sense for you. Deanna asked, hey, is there any books or articles on EI or EQ, emotional intelligence, for help. So just a little note about emotional intelligence. Emotional intelligence is extremely useful when you are having sticky conversations because it allows you to identify the emotions of others. And emotions are data. So emotional intelligence is really understanding and identifying the emotions of others and in yourself and being able to know what that data is telling you. That's oversimplification, but that's really what emotional intelligence, boiled down and over summarized, is. And there's a wealth of books out there, a wealth of articles out there, but it's really being able to, through practice, identifying, understanding emotions, and then norm responses, as well as being able to know what that data is telling you. So if you're feeling a certain way, knowing what that feeling means to you, again, very subjective internally, but also being able to help inform our responses to other people. Just because someone comes to you irritated and jittery doesn't mean they're irritated and jittery at you. It could mean it's just something that happened to them that morning. So one of the things that happens oftentimes, and it propels a sticky conversation, is we assume that because someone is acting a certain way around us, that is personal. Oftentimes it's not. Sometimes it is, but oftentimes it's just not. Sometimes it's just the way they are. Sometimes they're having a bad day. But it's often a great idea to get some more information around that so you can respond appropriately or help that person at ease. Now, I'm not saying we all have to go sign up to be peacekeepers, and it's also very helpful for your credibility and be able to elevate your impact and influence to make sure you're responding appropriately to the situation. So hopefully that makes sense. Let me know if you have any questions so far, because we're getting ready to segue into another part of our discussion today around sticky conversations. We're having sticky discussions about sticky conversations. I know I'm overdoing that. Yes, I get it. But the art of challenging conversations as well. So this is one that needs a little bit more planned. Now, a couple of years ago, my husband came home and he had a teammate. He was supervising a team of engineers, and one of his team was a little insubordinate to him and around him in a meeting. And I said, "Oh, okay." And this is not wasn't the first time it happened. I said, "All right, well, I recommend, as your coach for free, should have charged him. He'd have done something. Anyway." Gave away where this story's going. But for free, I recommend that you set a time and a date to talk to this individual about what was observed and, you know, start to have that dialogue. And so the next day, he was like, "Oh, yeah. Next day, so did you make a meeting with so-and-so?" Nope. Okay. 3 days later, "Oh, yeah, did you ever?" Nope. I was like, "You know what? At this point, don't bother." After a week had gone by, there is no point in circling back, really. 2 weeks, I think it was later, I finally said, if you're not going to do this, your lack of action is explicit agreement to whatever the behavior was. So if it is a sticky conversation that you need to have, time is of the essence. Please don't let it languish, because unfortunately, to most people, silence is approval, right? So when you realize you do need to gain some clarity around a potential confrontation or sticky conversation, make plans to meet with that person as soon as possible. The facts are fresher, number one, and more relevant if the topic is recent. If you delay, or worse, don't have the discussion at all, you could even erode your own self-esteem and look back over it going, "Oh, I never did have that conversation," and then it eats away at you. So you'll lose your own self-respect if you feel inadequate because you didn't do what was needed and took the necessary steps instead of the easy way out. So yes, we're naturally confrontation averse, but not every sticky conversation needs to be a confrontation, right? That's why we're having this discussion today on Career Coffee Chat. So challenge your assumptions, number one. Again, with this gentleman who was a little backtalkish to my husband years ago, It could have just been a bad day, right? And calling attention to that would have called attention to the behavior and gone, oh, I didn't realize that that's how I came off. But it's instinctive to view a situation and relevant to how it impacts us and personalize it. Oh, this is a personal attack. It may not be, but it's important to also understand what it is. So we don't want to just ignore it, if that makes sense. And sometimes we need to do this for the greater good. So if a team player or teammate or someone who's reporting to you is not acting, behaving, or producing in a certain fashion or to expectations, etc., sometimes we need to have these sticky conversations, but challenge your assumption about this person. If you think this person is just, an underperformer, oh, well, they're never going to get it. They're just an underperformer. That probably won't help the conversation that you're about to have. So challenge your assumptions. And while we're not going to get into that today, one of the reasons you don't want to go into a conversation like that thinking this person is a low life or having all these biases and judgments about this individual is because of the expectation effect. And to over summarize the expectation effect, when you enter in a conversation with an expectation or judgment about the other person, it will drive your micro actions. So your tone of voice, how you look, how you behave, your body posture, everything, it will tailor and tweak it based on your expectations, your internal expectations or biases about this person, and then actually elicit more of what you expected to see. It's really very interesting. It has been proven. It's particularly poignant with leaders and their teams. It also works in personal relationships or peer-to-peers. So be cognizant of that when you're going into a sticky conversation. Please don't let any sort of bias or judgment about this person lead, because that will then create more of the same. And if you want something different, well, that's not helpful, is it? So yes, everything starts inside, doesn't it? So challenge your assumptions. And also, when we're going to have a planned sticky conversation, the outcomes are not necessarily all about what you want. Now, I did see something posted the other day on LinkedIn. Don't go into a negotiation you're not willing to walk away from. I would have to say that's a bit dire. And there's a negotiation is more of a collaborative approach. Fair? So when you go in to have any sort of sticky conversation, it's like a negotiation. It's a conversational negotiation. It's more of a collaborative approach, or should be, particularly if you want a positive outcome. So it's likely that neither party will get like, oh, this is my way or that's your way, but there's going to be a collaborative or some concessions made, if that makes sense. And also, before you go into the sticky conversation that you need to have, ask yourself the really hard question. Is this a sticky conversation because of the situation? Is this a sticky conversation because of the person? Or is this a sticky conversation because of me? Sometimes we can be our own worst enemy. Don't always assume it's the other person that's the problem. And also coming in with the right attitude is really, really important. If you come in with this my way or the right way or the highway attitude, the chances are you going in as a speaker or interrogator versus being a listener is pretty high. And if you don't go in with the right attitude, it's less likely you'll stick to the facts and more likely you'll let emotion lead first. Conversation, again, the conversation does not have to be confrontational. And also know that you cannot necessarily control another person's reactions or feelings concerning a situation. They might be trigger points that you're totally unprivy to, right? And you may end up having to deal with a difficult person in addition to a challenging conversation. It's important to remain calm, take the breath, balanced, centered, be curious, and non-judgmental, right? But it's also a great idea to have a game plan. So let me know if you have any questions so far. I know we've got quite a bit of information here. Jesse was just sharing with Deanna. I was just adding to your insight as I also have the same thing about EI and EQ. I feel like risk being measured in severity and likelihood, that emotional intelligence risk of breakdown is measured by a lack of time to prepare, surprise, intensity of conversation. Yes, it's interesting you mentioned that, Jesse, because sometimes in the moment we well, basically the limbic brain likes to take over, and that's the emotional center part of our brain versus our frontal lobe, and our frontal lobe's trying to catch up, and like, wait a minute with this runaway train. What are you doing? And our limbic brain's like, rah, 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 rah. Not being very helpful. So just some simple, very simple tactics like just breathing, that is an intervention that helps your frontal lobe catch up, if that makes sense. Now, Tio asked, have you been successful in trying to change the behavior of a micromanager? Probably agreeing some basic communication rules. Very interesting. You mentioned that, Tio. Well, actually, I have not only helped people, deal with their own micromanagers or deal with a peer who's a micromanager, I have also been a victim of a micromanager as well. Micromanagers generally are micromanagers for a variety of reasons, most, not all, but most of which revolve around insecurity. So there is some internal knowledge that they're lacking, either knowledge or capability, or maybe they have imposter syndrome or what have you, right? So it's an internal thing that's going on that's driving them to want to be more in people's business. Control freak, right? I have to control all the parts because they're afraid of failure. That's another thing. Someone who's extraordinarily risk averse may be more of a micromanager because they're just terrified of any sort of failure, and they're also convinced that they have the right way of doing everything because clearly their way is the right way, right? And anybody else's methods may risk some sort of failure or something. So these people tend to micromanage. And when the case of myself, the only way to survive it after first fighting it unsuccessfully and realizing, okay, that's not the way forward, is to over communicate. Over communicate everything. This person had to have total privy to my calendar, also had to be invited to every meeting that I was invited to, whether or not he was going. He had to be invited to all of them. And he also took credit for all my work, although it didn't go over very well because clearly everybody knew I was doing the work. So it kind of made him look foolish, but that's neither here nor there. He was still a micromanager, so he had to be like on everything. And the only thing I could do to help him feel more secure, because he knew he wasn't as capable, and that's what was driving the behavior. He felt insecure and threatened by me, so it was driving a behavior of micromanaging. So in order to help him feel more secure that I was here to support him and make sure he was good, I communicated everything. I gave him a report every day. It was a short one. It was a short email at the end of every day, what I accomplished, the highlights. I gave him the highlights. So I hit him in the highlight reel every day and then a summary at the end of every week. Did it make me grit my teeth? Yes, it did. And it kept him off my back. He also stopped coming to all my meetings. Whew. Because he would take up so much time and I couldn't get anything done because he was busy trying to prove to everybody he was so smart. So that's how I did that. And understanding what is the most important thing for the micromanager. Is it a failure avoidance issue? Is it of control because they feel insecure? What is the root cause? And then being able to give that person a sense of security. That's really important to help deal with someone who is a micromanager. If you are someone that micromanager's boss, I would encourage you to get them coaching. Yes. And that is the only way this person is going to be able to break through these roadblocks. It's actually sabotaging them in the long run, sabotaging their career, sabotaging their credibility in the long run. So it's very unhealthy for them overall, but they don't recognize that. And until they can get some thoughtful coaching, they're not going to be able to break those barriers down. And simply walking up to someone and going, you're micromanaging these people, that person will be instantly defensive. So that's typically not the path forward. And then you'll end up in a sticky conversation. Speaking of it, so I hope that helps, Tio. I hope that helps you and your micromanager. I don't know if you're managing this person or whether you're dealing with them as a peer or her as a peer or the other way around. So let me know if that helps, or if you have any other questions, I'm happy to help. So if you have any other questions about sticky conversations, whether it's dealing with a micromanager or coaching up or managing up or dealing with someone who's toxic, let me know. We have those. And by the way, toxic people, those people that you're just like, oh my God, this person is horrible. Sometimes they're just legitimately horrible people. Okay, there are legitimately horrible people out there for a variety of reasons. Some of these are psychoses, have gone undiagnosed, etc. And sometimes they're just opposite work style than you. And it's not that they're bad, it's that their way of dealing with information, how they process information, how they listen, how they talk, how they act is completely opposite of you. So to you, you'd be like, they're so offensive. And it's just because they're a different work style. So they're very blunt and what's next. And you're more thoughtful and you really like to consider everybody's opinions. And this person's like, no, it's my opinion. Chances are they're a D or an S on the DISC spectrum. And that's opposites. Those are the two biggest conflicts I see in the workplace. There are others, but that's the two biggest ones that I see. So sometimes those sticky conversations can be just driven because these are two different work styles, and having that very thoughtful approach of understanding what is important to this person, what are they really driving at, what is their biggest beef, and being able to get more data around how can we work together and move forward is a great idea. Now, with people who are very impatient and what's next type of individuals, you probably want to do that a little bit faster. So the be brief part is really, really important to get buy-in from them. So let me know if you have any other questions about that. We're talking about having a planned, difficult conversation. So having a game plan is really important when you have a planned, sticky conversation to have. First thing I recommend people do is try to separate the person's action from your opinion of that person. Again, coming back to that expectation effect, where if you expect someone or have a bias or a judgment about someone, chances are you will actually drive more of that. So to avoid that, we want to try to separate the person's actions from your opinion of the person. So if you think that person's an underperformer, for example, you don't want to come in saying, wow, this is a useless conversation. This person's just going to be an underperformer and they don't care, what have you, right? So that's probably not going to help the conversation. Then when you have to have this conversation, clarifying your understanding of the situation at hand with the other person first. So don't just go in saying, well, you know what this is about. Chances are they have no idea. So you might want to just say, hey, I've observed this. Are you aware of that? Whatever it is, help the person understand what's going on. And then seek to understand through questions. Ask the other person to share their perspective. What's going on? I'll give you a great, for instance. Many years ago now, gosh, time flies. I was brought into a team of continuous improvement experts and coordinators. And as someone who was apparently really my new boss at the time had really talked me up to the team. So much so, in fact, they all hated me before I even started working. They figured that I was going to be a know-it-all and I had all the answers and blah, 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 blah. Of course, I have no idea about any of this. It wasn't until much later, several months, in fact, I was like, gosh, I'm having a really hard time interacting or collaborating with these people. They seem very defensive and just not open and not friendly. I didn't know what was going on. So I finally decided to sit down with one of the main perpetrators and figure out what was going on. So first I gave her some context. I said, hey, I've noticed this and I'm really curious as to what is going on, because I want to be able to work collaboratively and make sure that we're a supportive and functional group and be a part of the team. And I feel like that's something of a struggle right now. So I opened up the floor for her to share what was going on. And then that's when I found out that all of this had been, the stage had been set for me. The trap had been set for me unwittingly, that I had walked into, while probably well-meaning. It did not go well. So ask the person if they're aware of any issues. So in her case, she was unaware that her behavior was actually creating issues on the project. So I said, hey, well, thank you for sharing. I understand your perspective. I can see where this would have gone wrong very quickly. Well, this is what I'm seeing on the project. How do you feel about that? Or what's your perspective? And just listen. Listen, 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 and then listen some more. Listen longer than you normally would. In fact, listen past the pause, because oftentimes the first pause, people are formulating their next thing they're going to say. Often we'll jump in on that first pause, and that stops that very beautiful, productive process. So don't succumb also to filling in words for the other person unless they're really struggling. And then you go, do you mean this? And then fine, if that's true. But if you're just being helpful, but don't do it because you're being impatient. And also keep in mind, it's not you versus them. You do not need to be right. You just need to do what is right and get the right kind of outcome for the team, if it's a team thing, or a beneficial outcome is just the two of us. It's also a great idea to repeat back facts to them as you gather from the conversation for clarity, and ask the other person what they think the key takeaways are from the situation and the conversation. Oftentimes that's very insightful. And then you can collaboratively plan what the next best steps are. Now, note that you may not always be able to end on the best note, but try to end on a better note, right? The best note you can. However, end the conversation immediately if it becomes negative or destructive, even if you're talking to a client. So if you feel that circumstances warrant the situation, you may want to seek the help of HR or your boss or what have you, or supervisor, or some sort of supporting body to help you manage this particular situation. But always try to end on the best note you can. And also, I like to let people know, hey, even though we may not agree, we can still collaborate, right? We don't always have to be implicit agreement for everything, even though I have a tendency to repeat myself till I get it. T.O. says, great, thanks for the tips. I'm glad that helped. So let me know if you have any questions about what I've shared so far. The last bit of what I'll share is more about negotiation. And in the spirit of the season, salary negotiation. So for some of you who are or considering making some salary negotiation happen, I'm really excited for you. And we'll be talking more about what that is. So it can be a very sticky conversation, which is why a lot of people avoid negotiating their salary or promotion or anything at all whatsoever, which is a huge disservice. You're leaving a lot on the table. Don't just accept whatever, go, oh, okay, thanks, and wander off. And you want to negotiate. It's okay. You're not being a bad person for negotiating. So please negotiate. And I think more people do now than they did several years ago, but numbers are still pretty alarming. I would just say 50% of people or less, and my professional ladies, even less than that. So please do negotiate. It is okay as long as you do it the right way, right? So let's talk about what the right way is. Number one, again, if you're negotiating, we want to try to do that with seeing the other person's face. You can't do it one-on-one in person, then at least want to try to see the other person's face. Now, sometimes that's just not feasible, and that's fine. But oftentimes negotiating when you are seeing another person's face, in general, as a general rule, negotiation should never happen unless you're seeing the other person's face. The salary negotiation, sometimes that's not always possible, but we just want to be very cognizant of how we approach an email if we're going to email it. Do try to set up a meeting if you can. But barring that, at least choose your words very wisely. Showing appreciation, so let's just say you got an offer, gosh, it's a little less than you expected, or even a lot less than you expected, then you want to definitely enter into those negotiations and know that there's more than just salary on the table. There's also great things like PTO, benefits, etc. Although benefits we can't do too much about because typically they're locked in for that group or that company, but we can negotiate more things like hybrid versus remote, flexible time. Is it a 980, which is you work 9 hours and you have every other Friday off? Is that more paid time off? And by the way, be very, very detail oriented about your paid time off, because as an experienced professional, please don't think that you need to throw away your 5 weeks vacation just because you're perhaps starting in a new company, or maybe you've pivoted your career and you're starting off with a little bit of a different type of role. You still are a working professional and have been for many years. You have so many weeks vacation. You don't have to start all over again. Now, I have had a client come back and say, oh, well, they just said that's their policy. And I have to say, that's bullcrap. No one just has a policy that just because you started here for the first time, you only get 2 weeks vacation. That's BS. No. Because once you accept a job, it's very difficult. It's impossible to negotiate more vacation unless you are getting ready to leave said job and said, well, in order to keep me, I need 5 weeks vacation or something. I mean, I don't know. But that is really the only time and the only way. So you want to make sure before you start the position that you have these details nailed down. And with paid time off, that's particularly interesting because some of those are required days off that you have to take because it's a holiday, like Thanksgiving or Christmas, for example. Right? So we want to make sure that those PTO days are enough to also encompass those forced holiday off times, and make sure you get it all in writing. Please, please, please don't just say, oh, well, they said. No, not good enough. Have it all in writing. So don't feel bad about negotiating. It is perfectly understandable. There are a few things to keep in mind when you are negotiating. And I'm getting ready to pull up my notes here because I don't want to miss any of them because they are important aspects. So it's really interesting. Now, this article, which I'll put in the show notes as well, I wrote this, I think, last year, but it's still applicable today. More hiring managers, a survey done by Robert Half has said that more hiring managers are more likely to negotiate salaries with new hires than they were ever before. Now, 50% at that time said they were just as likely to, and 36% said they were more likely to. And I would say probably that number is a little bit higher now, particularly with the Great Resignation and that sort of thing. So first thing is, understand and articulate your value. Any professional, whether you are negotiating for a new role or whether you're looking to make a leap up within your company, understand and articulate your value is absolutely critical. And most of us do not do a great job of doing that. Now, a previous Career Coffee Chat show, I shared more about how to do that. So you might want to look that up, go to my YouTube channel and check that out and make sure you get that under your belt as well when it talks about articulating your value, because most people struggle here because we feel like it's bragging or something like that. No, you're not bragging. You're simply stating facts. You're stating facts of how you contributed to the organization, even if it's doing something supposedly in your job function. That's still value. Hello, or they wouldn't have the job function to begin with. So you want to be able to understand and articulate that. And if you can speak about impacts and outcomes, that's tremendously helpful. If you're looking for a promotion, this is really important. Most people, when they're going for a promotion, don't put together a business case. particularly people who are emerging leaders or looking to go into leadership, or they're new leaders. They don't put together business cases for their promotion or the request for promotion or why they should be considered for a particular position. And that business case is really important. Basically, it tells the powers that be what your goal is in that role and how you plan on adding value to the company and the business. And yes, of course, they'll add value to you, hopefully, by giving you bigger salary and a pay increase and all the goodies. And they're looking to basically what's in it for them, right? So if we're going to give you this role, what are your plans? And they want to see that you're thinking forward and that you have a plan, as well as they want to see what value you plan on adding to the company. This also holds true in some regard for new roles as well, new organizations or a different organization. You want to be able to articulate your value and your impact. And that is very important for the interview, which isn't something we're talking about specifically today, but it's also very important to be able to articulate your value in the interview. Again, huge gap. Most people totally don't do a great job of this, but we want to be able to discuss our career contributions in a factual way, and then most importantly for new roles, be able to connect them with the work they're looking for. So what they want to accomplish with this role, how you can then obviously further that goal. And then obviously you want to research and evaluate your salary range. I don't recommend early on in the job search strata, for example, that you go in and say, oh, I want $158,153. Maybe later on, yes. But early on, you probably want to give a range, just knowing that you need to be comfortable with the lowest number on the range, because that's probably what they'll give you starting off with. Assume you deserve top pay for your experience range. Please don't go in and say, oh, well, gosh, I don't have intimate knowledge of SQL and therefore whatever. Stop doing that to yourself. Assume you deserve top pay for your experience range. And just because you're missing a skill, something that can be learned easily, that does not mean you're less of a person. All right. When it comes to negotiation itself, so you've gotten the offer, yay, and you need to negotiate that sucker because, ooh, it's a little less than I thought it was. Well, know your exact number. Instead of saying, let's say, for example, $165,000, ask for $165,475. Be specific. That's when you want to get fiddly. That's when you want to get particular. When you use an uncommon exact figure, fun fact, you're more likely to receive it. Your future potential employer will also assume that you've done your research and will be less likely to negotiate back or use hard negotiation tactics. So that's kind of interesting. If you go a little high, that's fine. Guess what? That's what negotiation is. If you come back a little high, I know people don't like doing that. They'll go back, oh, well, how about $5,000 more? No, go a little high and then you can work it out. And that's another reason why it's great to have an in-person or face-to-face conversation with the person you're negotiating or having this conversation with. That way they can see that you're earnest, that you want the role. You just want to make sure that you're paid fairly for the work that you do, right? And when it comes to negotiating a raise, for example, you want to pick your time wisely. You don't want to wait until the performance review. That's not a good time to start having this conversation. You want to start talking about this several months in advance. Ideally, not all, but a lot of performance reviews or that type of conversation happens in the spring, right about now, in fact. We want to have that conversation before Christmas. That's when they're planning the budget. So you want to start having those conversations much earlier. And another fun fact, Thursdays, who knew, are the best days to ask for a raise. So salary negotiations that are done on Thursdays and Fridays are more likely to have positive results than they are done on Mondays. Don't ask on a Monday. Not a good day. Time of day also may impact, particularly if you are doing an internal request. So if your request for a raise is received in the morning and your superiors are not morning people, probably not the best time. So knowing when this person is the sharpest is probably the best time to have this discussion. What's really interesting, a study done by Dr. Shannon, I'm going to butcher this last name, Kolakowski, showed that there's something called the Monday morality, morning morality effect. And people tend to have higher levels of moral awareness in the morning and make less ethical decisions as the day wears off. I'll have to watch myself for sure. I had no idea. So pay attention to your boss's mood or your decision maker's mood, and what day or time of the day is best to have these types of conversation, because it matters. When you go into this negotiation conversation, be calm, be confident. Please don't go in and go, well, probably won't get anything, but here goes nothing. If you set up that kind of mindset, guess what, ladies and gentlemen? That's probably the outcome you will get. So please go in with a more positive and self-supporting mindset into this conversation. And be calm and be confident during the conversation itself. Make sense? Try to take the emotion and stress out as much as possible. So do something prior to the conversation that calms you down. Maybe that's breathing exercise, meditation, mindfulness, go for a walk the dog, pet the dog. I don't know. Something that makes you feel better. Eating chocolate, whatever works for you, that's what you need to do to make sure you go into that conversation calm and confident. And knowing that while it may not go exactly the way you would like it to go, it's going. And sometimes action is the best thing. Now, if it is a new job, then yes, don't please, I would encourage you to consider not being afraid, oh, what if they rescind the offer? That almost never happens. I won't say it doesn't ever happen, but it almost never happens. Now, wild extrapolation, if they came back at, I don't know, 250,000 and you came in, I want 750,000, that might be a bit of a pill for them to swallow. So even if, let's say, your first attempts at salary negotiation are rebuffed, don't give up. Look for other options if you really want the job or if it's an internal position. Be diligent and calm. And also stick to your guns about your value and the value you will add to the organization. And again, don't ignore perks like PTO. Be very, very scrutinizing of those. So let's say an interesting fun fact, a salary survey by salary.com revealed that 37% of people negotiate the salaries of those who negotiated. They were able to increase their salary by over 7%. I'll have to say more than that now. This was done several years ago. Right now, we're looking at 15% pay raises or better. So hopefully that's you. Hopefully you've enjoyed this conversation about sticky conversations. And if you do have any questions, please don't be shy. Pop them in the chat, in the comments, send me a direct message. And again, feel free to check out my YouTube channel, Coachy Urban. And you have more information at coachyurban.com, of course. You can subscribe to the YouTube channel and always get access to these replays and more information, as I mentioned, about articulating your value, which is a prior show. You can get access to that as well. Or feel free, if you're into podcasts, share this with your friends, your colleagues. Go on to iTunes, Spotify, whatever is your flavor of choice. Give us a thumbs up, give us a like. We appreciate that. And always, you know, my friends, I'm here to help you. So if you have any questions, reach out to me. And as always, my fondest wish and action item for us this week is to keep elevating, my friends. And I'll see you next week. Ta for now.